So we are at session 11 of 12, Marriage and Family Counseling. Tonight we're going to talk about parenting troubled children. And originally, Catherine Whithorn did this presentation. She had a ministry called Home for Healing Hearts. And she was a residential youth counselor. She works specifically with what are known as RAD kids, reactive attachment disorder. We'll talk a little bit about that. So she originally did this presentation because this is an area of expertise that she had. It was very remarkable to me how young she was, but how much wisdom she had. God had really blessed her. She, married, has little ones of her own, and actually adopted a girl who had been part of her caseload. We have to understand that when we're dealing with this level or degree of troubled child, that there are some neurobiological problems that make this even more difficult. So keep that in mind. This is not just about mind or heart, but there are some neurobiological challenges that have to be overcome. Think of fetal alcohol syndrome, that type of challenge. Okay. So part one is parents, understanding and reshaping worldview. So things to remember when it comes to biblical counseling of parents with troubled children. 3 things we want to remember: BAM, Q-tip, and awe. BAM is boundaries are maintained. Q-tip, quit taking it personally. And awe, approach with empathy. And the working definition for this session, for empathy, the feeling that you understand and share another person's experiences and emotions, the ability to share someone else's feelings, the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another, of either the past or present, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objectively explicit manner. Also the capacity for this. So what we're talking about is you can feel the depth of grief that a person is experiencing as they share part of their story, even though you haven't experienced that's gone through the same experience. But the emotional content of that, you can feel that, you can empathize. You're not necessarily identifying with it, but in the moment, you're able to connect with that depth of emotion. So when we talk about boundaries are maintained, quit taking it personally, approach with empathy. Boundaries are maintained. Something simple. We do not slam doors. No, we do not slam doors. Okay. However many times you need to go back and do that properly, we'll give you all the practice that you need. Okay. We do not slam doors. We do not slam. We close doors gently. We do not slam doors. We close doors gently. We do not slam doors. We do not slam doors. We close doors gently. And just continue. Okay, let's try it. Good job. That's really good. That's really good. Then, man, we need to practice again. And just, boundaries are maintained. You don't go into another person's room. You don't hit. You don't scream. We're not going to scream. We're going to find words to use to communicate what we need. It takes a lot of time and energy because these children are going to be emotionally reactive more than anything. rationality and reason that have to be taught to them. Okay. When you're dealing with especially what they call rad kids, what's happening, the reason where this comes from is you'll have children who, you see this a lot with foreign adopted children, okay, or children who had meth moms or some kind of addicted mom while they were pregnant. But especially with foreign adopted children, you'll see this often. The need they had to emotionally, mentally, physically connect and with their mother and attached to their mother, their primary caregiver, nurturer, was broken, significantly broken. And so the thing that they need the most is to be loved, cared for, and nurtured. However, their underlying belief, without even being able to articulate it, is that they're going to be abandoned. They're going to be rejected. What they need is, if once they have it, it'll be taken away from them. Okay, so it becomes a, you can't fire me, I quit. So they'll push away, push away, push away, push away. Until eventually they are abandoned. I've worked with families. Matter of fact, Kelly, you guys worked with a couple where they had one of those children, and they would just get so tired that they would have him go to juvie. They'd send him to, which is exactly what he was convinced was going to happen. Is every time they would do that, it proved that his fears were well grounded, and so it would get exponentially more intense the next time. And the underlying conviction is, I didn't sign up for this. Well, you did without realizing, but you did sign up for this. You are the one that insisted on adopting this child. You insisted on adopting this child. Okay, so in that moment, you believed that that was God's will. So now you don't believe it was God's will? I realize how hard this is. I worked with one family. They had 3 foreign adopted children. And the behaviors were horrible. They're just horrible behaviors. Well, one of the little girls, she would get in meltdown mode and would scream at the top of her lungs, just, right? And didn't know what to do, And so what I coached Dad to do was, you sit down on the floor, wrap your legs around her, your arms around her, and you hold her and you rock her and you tell her that you love her and you're never letting go. Okay. She would bite, she would spit, she would scream, she would scratch. It took over 3 hours the first time. You don't need to scream. You're going to be okay. You don't need to scream. You're going to be okay. I love you. I'm never letting go. 2 days later, meltdown mode again. 3.5 hours. 4th time, 5th time, 6th time. The 7th time, under 3 hours. Over the course of 2 years, it got down to where she would start to have meltdown. She would move toward him to be held. Along the way, he said, when you feel that rise up, instead of screaming, you come and get a hug. And if I'm not here, you call me. I don't care what I'm doing. That took a whole lot of sacrifice. It took a whole lot of making room to be inconvenienced. If she woke up with a nightmare in the middle of the night, it could be even worse. But he stayed faithful with it. And she's a vibrant young lady these days. Boundaries are maintained. Here's another one. Child earns some money that they can use for discretionary spending. Okay, we're gonna go to Walmart, do a little shopping, bring your discretionary spending money with you. Right? Well, one of the children forgets. They see something in the store that they want. They didn't bring their money. They want to borrow the money to buy it, and they'll pay you back when they get home. You have to say, we're not doing that. Our agreement, the rule is, you bring your money to spend your money, not to spend my money. And borrowing my money to spend doesn't make it your money. Okay, so you remember next time, and next time we come, you'll be able to get it. And throw a fit. We're not throwing a fit. Okay, everyone, we're leaving now. Keeping calm. The last thing that it helps, the last thing to ever be helpful is getting ratcheted up and emotionally intense when they are. Okay, they feel out of control. If you get loud and reactive, that means you're out of control. So the fear ratio goes through the roof. Because if they're not in control and you're not in control, nobody's in control. And things being completely out of control, nothing but chaos, isn't just fear-inducing, it's terrifying. Along this line, quit taking it personally. Q-tip. You are not the enemy to them. You represent the thing that they fear. Okay. Now remember, you're talking to parents of these children. You represent, okay? Mom abandoned the child. Okay. You've adopted this child. You're the mom now. He expects you to abandon him. Because you're the mom person. Not because it's you, but because of the role that you fill. Right? And Kelly, you know, another counseling situation where we've got the same kind of a deal for years and years and years. Because there's these expectations that if I love the child enough, they'll respond just to my love. No, there's an underlying brokenness that has to be addressed too. Your love isn't the greatest force in the universe. Sorry, ma'am. Quit taking it personally. Even if they call you names and spit at you and destroy your stuff on purpose because it's yours. They will continue to push. They will exhaust absolutely every possibility of you rejecting them before they'll be able to trust that you're not going to reject them. And sadly, people that are getting ready to do foreign adoptions or adopt meth babies or fetal alcohol syndrome babies don't hear these kinds of things. Or if they do, they shrug it off, think, yeah, but I'm different. And then approach with empathy. I know you're terrified right now. I know you're very angry right now. I know you hurt deep inside and you don't know even how to find where it comes from. Okay. Approach with empathy. So remember, BAM, Q-tip, awe. Okay. Now, you have the parental unit, and it has to be a unit. You have the nurturer and the provider. the nurturer, the primary nurturer, is generally the mother, not always, but generally so. And the provider, primary breadwinner, is generally the father. Again, sometimes that's not always the case. But understanding that both those roles are critically important in the child's life. They're important in any child's life, but the severely damaged children, like we're talking about, it's even more significant. I know one little boy, it took 8 years for him to be able to trust that the food on the table had been provided by the provider person in the parenting unit, provided for him, and it wasn't going to be taken away from him. He would wrap his arm around the dish and he would shovel it in his mouth as fast as he could, looking like a wild animal trying to protect his food. 8 years. It's okay. I'm not going to take it away. We earned the money, bought the food for you. That's for you. You can eat however much you need. Stealing and hoarding food. Okay, we don't need to do that. There's plenty, right? We you know where it is, and when it's time to eat, we'll have snack time, everything else. It took a long time for that child to trust. Okay? But then you have the nurturer, and this can get really hard because the nurturer, whoever's in the nurturing role, is going to be engaged in the deep relational aspects of this, the mental and emotional connections, right, which are far more draining than the physical demands of the provider. So the nurturer is going to need respite, is going to need help, is going to need to be nurtured. That's part of what the provider is going to do, is nurture the nurturer. Provide rest and respite, provide support, provide backup. When a child says, I hate you, I don't believe that, but even if you do, we love you. But these two people have to work cooperatively. They have to be a united front. They have to be there to support each other. But the nurturer is the one that is going to need the most support of the. And when you have a mother who's, you have a woman who's naturally a nurturer. You have a husband who's naturally a worker and a provider, isn't very relationally intuitive. Okay. Doesn't understand, really connect with the dynamics of the emotional drain, the emotional demandedness of the mother-child relationship, especially with one of these kinds of children. And so it'll become very functional. They just want to address behavior. And they ignore the underlying heart of the matter. Or they want to make it rational and reasonable. Well, you've got a lot of emotion that's driving behind this, so connecting with the nurturer as well. So there's 4 key questions. What is their worldview as a parental unit? Are they on the same page? How do they see themselves? Do they have a biblical understanding of the marriage relationship, and that it is the primary relationship in the home that establishes the family? And even though the needs of the child can be the most demanding energy and emotion and energy drain in the household, do they really see that the parental unit, that marriage relationship, is the key relationship and core relationship in that family? And how do they view themselves in light of the choices that their children make? Because when a child knows they're not supposed to do something, they do it anyway. Or the child knows they're supposed to do something and they willfully choose not to do it. it can be really easy for those parents to blame the other parent for not doing their part, not being present enough, or not being involved enough, or not disciplining enough, or not saying the right words the right way in the right tone. So that how they see themselves as a parental unit now is broken down too. And the third question is, where does God fit into how they view themselves as parents? Do they see themselves as God's agents in this child's life? And that their ultimate responsibility, as we've been reading in Shepherding a Child's Heart, is to turn that child's heart toward God. Teach that child about God, but turn that child's heart toward God. Is God the mainstay of their individual lives and their life as a couple? A lot of questions. And then the fourth question is, how do we begin to reshape that view? Okay. So first we have to help them discover how does God define this? How does God see these things? And then how do we reshape their view so they're more on the same page, more in step with God? Okay. Sitting down with a couple that has 3 children, 2 of them rad kids, foreign adopted kids, trying to get them to go through intimate allies, they're going to say, we don't have the energy. I said, you really can't afford not to. You really can't afford not to. Okay. Even if you, when you get to bed at night, one of you reads 1 page or 3 paragraphs or whatever out loud, and the other one reads 3 page or 3 whatever. Even if it takes you a year to get through it, do it together. Do it together. The point is not to get it done, but to get into it and get doing it. Shepherding a child's heart. Okay. Yeah, you've got a nice framework. So how do you apply these things in this context? So the next key is parenting with the redemptive kingdom perspective. So the first one is we are created for intimate relationship in glory. And we see that all through the end of Genesis chapter 1. Children are born into this world with no understanding, but with a necessity of dependence. Okay? There's absolutely nothing that they understand. When they're hungry, they cry. Why? They don't know. It's the only thing they can do. That's how they're made. They start learning, but they have no understanding intellectually. But all of us have an intuitive understanding of what God's order is. We know intuitively where they're being loved and cared for, even as little children. A child knows when it's upset whether it's being comforted or not. They may not really understand what they know, but they do know. But they are 100% dependent on their parents for everything. Think about a newborn. I mean, you even have to position them correctly so they don't get into a position where they can't breathe, where they don't choke, even where their head is supported if they're not laying down, right? I mean, they need help with absolutely everything. There's nothing that's exempt. They're 100% dependent on their parents. The second thing we have to remember is that a deception is presented, a choice is made, and then there's consequences, right? So abuse, neglect, illness, separation, divorce, great loss, all of those things, there's a deception that's presented. Okay? God's order is not operational, can't be trusted, it isn't valid, it's not present. So instead of being cared for and nurtured, you're abused and neglected. Instead of being in an intimate relationship, there's separation, abandonment. All of it represents great loss. And remember, an adult makes a sin choice, harms a child, and the consequences of that aren't just felt in a moment. And if those choices are repeated, the consequences of that can be felt for a lifetime. So then we have a worldview is established, and it's got Romans 3:23. So it says, list some worldviews. So when you think about some worldviews that people have, and we don't necessarily have to go into all the formal isms, but what are some of the worldviews that people have?
I mean, would you say like humanism is?
Okay, humanism says what? Man is basically good and you have the potential to rise to the fullest of your potential. Okay? Follow your heart. That's humanism. What about atheism? That there is no God. Right? That's a worldview.
Is hedonism?
Yeah, kind of. Hedonism is about sensual, physical pleasure. I'm entitled to that. Sure, I'm entitled to feed my fleshly appetites. Yeah. I mean, just those three right there pretty much summarize just about everything you're going to see, right? In John 3:16, we see that there's a pursuit that begins. Okay. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. God so loved the world that he sent his son. Okay. So we rebelled, as we talked about in Humanity and Sin, our original the founding parents of the human race rebelled, and we've all rebelled since then. And we continue in rebellion. But God chose to pursue a solution to our separation from him. That's what he created us for. We're like our own version of rad kids, except he didn't abandon us, we abandoned him. We have to choose. We have to choose what we're going to do with that gift. We're going to reject it? We're going to walk all over it? What are we going to do with it? And we all know John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave his one unique son, so that whoever would believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life. But we go on to verse 17. God did not send his son into the world that he might condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. And it goes on. Anyone who believes in him is not condemned, but anyone who does not believe is already condemned because he has not believed in the name of the one and only Son of God. We have to choose obedience or disobedience. So dealing with one of these children is saying, you realize you're choosing disobedience. You know better. Even though your heart can't catch up, you do know better. Okay? Just like you do with any child. And then we release the child in love. Okay. What that means is their obedience or disobedience cannot be about how we look as parents. And that's another thing that ends up happening, right? Okay, so yeah, the kid's 8 years old and throws himself on the floor in the store, starts screaming and pounding in his fists. Just because people look at you like you're a horrible parent doesn't mean you're a horrible parent. Their opinion can't matter. That child needs to be dealt with, but it needs to be dealt with in love. But also, boundaries are maintained. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. Okay, it's time for us to go. And we won't be back here for a while. Our plans for the afternoon have now changed. Just again, I can remember seeing those kinds of situations in the store where the mother is just sobbing and she's just at her wit's end. She doesn't know what to do. She's not saying anything. She's just waiting for him to run out of gas. That's not what he needs. And it seems it is sinful. The thing is that this child has no self-control yet, or very little. And there are a lot of people who say, well, that child just needs enough of a whooping. That's not what the child needs. And people with that mindset really have no business trying to parent children like this. And then we always have to ask the question, so when you're rebellious, so you're dealing with someone who's got one of these children they're trying to parent. They've taken the responsibility for one of these children. Say, okay, well, how does God parent you when you're rebellious? How does God parent you when you badmouth one of your brothers or sisters in Christ? Or when you gossip about one of your brothers or sisters in Christ? How does God parent you when you don't take care of the responsibilities you know or you're supposed to? How does God parent you? And if you get the pat answer, well, God disciplines. Okay, well, so describe to me the last discipline experience you had with God. Describe that to me. Because they may know the words, but they may not be able to even connect with the discipline. So they don't even recognize godly discipline or loving discipline. But I said, and don't forget, Romans 2, verse 4, God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance. That's how God parents you. That's how he parents me. Because remember, he doesn't condemn, he doesn't punish, he corrects. He disciplines, he chastises, but he does not condemn, he does not punish. Okay, so let's go ahead and start into this next part before we take our break. Troubled children, application of God, who is love in parenting. Encourage them to understand their child's worldview. So where has my child come from in life? What do they understand, not only about where the child comes from, what were their experiences, and what do those kinds of experiences do to a child? How do they shape and form a child's mind, a child's thinking, a child's heart, a child's motivations, a child's beliefs? Where has my child come from in life? Start there. And the second question is, what is my child's self-image? How does my child view themselves? And what is my child's view on how others view him or her? They may hate themselves because they think other people hate them, or they may think other people laugh at them. They may think other people think they're better than them. They may think other people look down on them. They may think other people think they're stupid, or ugly, or fat, or stinky. Okay. So they get get the image of themselves from other people and other people's opinions, even if that's not really their opinion. So what does my child believe about the way that we, the parents, view him or her? Because that's going to have a significant weight as well. And these first three questions are really important to have well thought out answers to, and they'll change over time as they get to know the child better. But it leads us to the fourth question, which is critical. What are the greatest lies that the enemy is presenting to my child? And remember, going back to Genesis 3, the lies the enemy presents are tied up in truth. The lies of the enemy are always wrapped in the truth. That's what makes them feasible, palatable, acceptable. Is that really what's true? No, here's what's true. Well, yeah, he was right. He was telling the truth that their eyes were going to be open and they'd know good from good and evil, the difference between good and evil. As far as the rest of it, well, they would be like similar to God in that way, but they wouldn't be like God in essence, which is, again, global language. You'll be like God. Okay, not in essence, but there'll be a functional aspect to you that'll be like God, but again, that was partly true, but not fully true. What are the lies the enemy is presenting to my child? That because your birth mother didn't love you enough to take care of herself, so she didn't poison you, because your birth mother and the family, because your birth mother was so busy getting high and doing drugs that she left you in your crib in your dirty diaper for a day and a half at a time. So you're worthless. You're a piece of garbage. You don't really matter. What are the greatest lies that the enemy is presenting to my child? And then 5, what are the greatest truths that I need to speak and apply into my child's life? You got a Bible full of them. Those children need to hear the same basic truths that any person needs to hear. They're created in God's image. They have inherent worth and value and dignity, even if nobody's ever recognized it before. They're in a home now where it is recognized and it is celebrated, and we're going to celebrate it even more. You're going to get sick of how much we celebrate. And then apply those to that child's life. Don't just speak them, but apply them, live them out, model them. It's not about smart, it's not about looks, it's about character. 6, what is my child's view of family? Is it a necessity or convenience? That really matters. Because if it's just a necessity to get by, they won't be able to attach to the family members. They won't be able to really experience love. They'll see the family members, the family unit and the family members as resources for them to get their needs met by, but it won't be about relationship. And then the last one, what is our child's view of our marriage? Are we united in his or her eyes, or are we easily triangulated? Super important. You'd be amazed at how quickly a child who's trying to emotionally survive in life can become sophisticatedly manipulative. They watch, they pay attention, trial and error. They know what works, they know what doesn't work. And don't forget, they are designed by God to be exceptional learners when they're young. We forget how to learn like that. They're like savants, they're like prodigies, they're like, geniuses with 300 IQs when it comes to perceiving what's going on in relationships and watching the dynamics. And the thing is you can't be one way out in the bedroom and a different way out in the living room. They'll spot it. They'll know the difference. So that's why the marriages have to be strong and healthy first. Because if they're not, if there's a weakness in the marriage, it's going to get worse. That little crack is going to become a crevasse. And a child will learn to exploit that. Okay, that's a good place for us to break. Let me kind of record this part. One of the things I meant to share with you all is that there's some things like we talked about that can they can help these kids, these children, to break free of these things. Remember, we talked about how their brain can get stuck. Jumping, physically jumping jacks, jumping on a trampoline, jumping up a step and down a step, that kind of thing, it can help their brain get unstuck. Another one is what they call strong sitting. And now that can be where you sit against the wall, slide down to where you're kind of like in a squatted position, or sit down on the ground facing the wall with your back straight, with your hands on your knees. Okay, it forces them to start thinking, because they have to think about all those things. You think of I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's called Fast and Snappy. Okay, let's get this done. Let's get this done. Let's go. Just really fast, really snappy. Doesn't really give them time to think or to get caught up in things. And the other one is to you talk over them. You don't talk to them, but you talk about them. I know he wants to run away. If he runs away, we'll call the police, and the police will get him, and either that or we'll have to figure something else out. So you have a conversation about them, not to them. So, and a conversation that they can hear. So it makes them start thinking. So they get out of that emotional reaction thing. Another one is the cradle them. And, but when you cradle them, another thing that's helpful is giving them something sweet at the same time. Releases endorphins, which lifts their mood a little bit. And it sounds kind of silly, but they talk about the emotional bonding that takes place with a child when a child is nursing. And there's a sweetness, the sweet sensors in a child's taste buds get activated by breast milk. So if you take something sweet like whipped cream or something like that, and put it in there, you don't let them take it from you, you put it in their mouth, and maple syrup, something like that, nothing chocolate. You could just give them sugar, or just a piece of candy. It's also something that can help with a bonding thing overall. One of the ones I love is Answer Crazy with Crazy. So one of the things that they'll do is they'll want to use your brain instead of using their own. So I ask you questions that they can figure the answer out for. Like, where are my shoes? Or what did you do with my shoes? Or is it raining outside? You can walk over to the window and look, that kind of thing. So it can be kind of crazy making. So you respond with, we're going to go and listen to the Aardvark Choir singing in Pekingese tonight. And again, it shifts their thinking. They're trying to catch up. Make sure that you want to make sure that, like I said, you're holding them. That's very, very important. Make sure you're giving them very specific behavior. Okay. So it's like, let's say they like to do something that you really would rather they didn't, right? And they do it all the time, like scratch themselves, right? Say, okay, we're not going to do this all the time. Okay, if you're going to go in and scratch yourself, or if you're going to scratch yourself, you're going to go in your room, you get 2 minutes, and that's all you get today. You only get to scratch or pick your nose or whatever it is for 2 minutes. Okay. Or if there's somebody who steals, okay, you say, okay, but you can only steal Twinkies, or you can only steal Cheetos, or you can only steal Doritos. You can't steal anything else. Okay, if you're going to steal anything, these are the things you can steal. So you're not telling them they can't do the behavior. What you're doing is you're managing the behavior, teaching them how to manage it, which then you can turn around and neutralize it. And the number one thing is, don't give them information. Okay. Don't tell them what's for dinner. Okay. Don't tell them where you're going after church. You have to kind of keep them in the dark. But these are all things that kind of help the children learn to develop a dependence on the parent, a bond with the parent, get them unstuck. And these aren't things you do all the time, but these are things tools you can pull out of the toolkit. It sounds kind of crazy, but and nonsensical. It says, well, You're supporting their bad behavior. Well, you're teaching them how to basically teaching them how to rewire their brains and to rehabituate themselves. We don't need any Pharisees involved. Pharisees get involved, they're going to destroy these kids. They always wreck it. They always wreck it. Always, 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 always wreck it. So, all right, so let's talk about I empower them with purpose. Now remember Proverbs 22:6. Does anybody know that famous verse? You're muted, Kelly. I saw your lips moving. You're muted.
Because I'm second guessing, is it the train a child up in the way they should go and they will never turn from it.
Yeah, right. Remember, this is a proverb, a principle, not a promise. So we say, okay, why has God placed those parents into the life of this particular child? Do you notice how I phrase that? Not why did God place this particular child in these parents' life, but why did God choose these particular parents to bring into this particular child's life, this specific child? That shows that God is governing this, and this is in order to bless the child. Okay. And then what is the function of each parent individually and as a unit? Now you've got some general principles, but you also have to figure out what works well. Like, right? Mom cannot get the kids to pick up after themselves. Dad can. Dad's figured out how to get them involved right away. Mom mentions it and it becomes a fight. So mom leaves it to dad. She doesn't fight with him over it. So not just what are the roles in general, but what are the roles specifically that work? And it's really about partnering together. And then what is expected of them as parents? What do they think? What does society say? And what does God say? Okay. What is expected of them? What are they expecting of themselves? And if you're expecting to be able to take one of these foreign adopted kids who's a rad kid, okay, the child never properly attached in a healthy way to a nurturing parent. They don't know how. They have to learn how. But they're afraid to, because when they really needed it in the earliest days of their life, it was denied them or taken from them. Okay. And then what ways are you going to reflect the full love of God to your child? So it's finding the balance of justice, consequences, mercy, and grace. We're back to that other question. Okay, so how does God parent me? How does God parent me? It's going to be sloppy, messy. It will fail, if you will, more times than it won't. They will be disobedient more times than they'll be obedient. They'll be belligerent more times than they'll be kind. But when they are kind, when they are cooperative, you commend them, you celebrate them for that. I so appreciate when you smile. I so appreciate when you say thank you. They will be drawn to that. They'll want to live up to that more. Not, I hate it when you yell. We're not going to yell. We don't yell. We use our words. We don't yell. And then you need to equip these parents with tools. First one is give them a redemptive kingdom perspective, right? Remember, when you take a look at Ephesians 6:1-4, what does it tell us about relationship? Parents, do not exasperate your children, but instead nourish them in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Right? There's a redemptive purpose. They need to come to know and love the Lord. Also help them understand that the consequences fitting the offense given in love are a positive thing. Okay? That can be difficult sometimes. So it's important for the parents not to give consequences if they're angry, or if the parents are feeling rejected, if the parents are feeling unloved by the child, if the parent is feeling like a failure, if the parent feels like they're looking bad to other people, this is a poor reflection on me as a parent. Okay. Consequences are there to retrain the child's mind and heart and direct them toward God. That's what consequences are for. Okay. Okay. So you know that no one gets up from the table until everyone's finished eating. Okay. So what's our rule? So you have to have a rule. So if someone gets up from the table before everyone's finished eating, what's our rule? What do we do? Well, they know what we do. Okay. You have to pick up and clear all the plates. Instead of us all doing it on our own, you're going to clear everybody's plate. It's not a huge thing, but it's enough of a consequence that it costs them something. Okay? They're not going to have to clear the plates and do the dishes, and it's not over the top. Okay? Be the anchor. A child who creates chaos does not feel comfortable when peace presents itself. Okay? They know how to do chaos. They don't know how to do calm. But yet they hate chaos, but they're also comfortable with it. So it's a love-hate thing. Okay. So being that calm point in the middle of the storm. And then eyes of love and genuine reflection penetrates the heart better than any other approach. So one of the things that can be really helpful is when you look at that child, in your mind, say, I love you. I love you more than you can ever know. Say that in your mind and it will show up in your eyes. Whatever's going on in your heart will show in your eyes, and they are looking for it. Your eyes are going to convey more to them than anything else. So whatever you're speaking in your mind is going to show in your eyes to them. So that look of love, eyes of love, I love you more than you will ever know. I will never abandon you. You don't have to even say those words, but think those thoughts and it'll show outside. Okay. Okay. That's all I have for this session. So what are your thoughts?